Good evening, everybody. Could I welcome you to this evening's Housing, Health and Environment Overview and Scrutiny panel? Could the teams be turned off because I could just hear myself talking, which I know isn't a great voice anyway, so thank you. Item number 1 on the agenda is announcements and the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside Lloyds Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Could all mobile phones be turned off or set to silent? And also just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded onto the council's YouTube page probably tomorrow. Unfortunately, the live streaming is not working this evening. Item number 2 is to receive any apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Pandare and also Councillor Beetham, who's been substituted by Councillor Hartshawn. Are there any other apologies that members would like to declare? No. Okay, so if those two could be minuted. Item number 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 23rd of November 2023. I've looked at those minutes and I believe them to be a true and accurate record of what happened, so I'm happy to propose those if they have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Harbison. Does any member wish to speak to the minutes? I see no indication, so we'll go to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Item number 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members would like to declare? Councillor Hartshawn.
Institution, my interests are not listed in the printed agenda, but they are available on the website.
No. Okay, so we'll move to item number 5, which is public consultation. I've been made aware of 2 members of the public who wish to speak this evening. Mrs. Michelle Kondarka on items 7, 8 and 9. And also on item 7, I have Elisa Novak, who I don't believe to be present. Mrs. Kondarka, that is right, 7, 8, 9. Thank you. Okay. So, moving on to item 6, questions to Cabinet. We have Councillor Golby, Deputy Leader of the Council, and Councillor Guttridge, who's Cabinet Member for Health and Environment, present this evening. Are there any questions? Can we start first with Councillor Golby, if that's okay? Councillor Kondarka.
Councillor Guttridge first.
First, and then go on to the next.
Okay, I'll carry on. Budget and the medium-term housing plan. We had a forward plan updated today when the housing strategy slipped back from March to June. So your policy of measuring twice and cut once is taking an awfully long while. So can we have an indication of what's happening with the housing strategy and the business case, obviously, that goes alongside that? Thank you.
The strategy of measuring twice and cutting once does take quite a while. And I've been very open in this council about when we've been looking into our everything that's going on in housing, everything that's going on in the finance of housing, we are finding historic things that need correcting. And before those things are correcting, we then have to move, we have to sort those out before we can move on. I cannot and will not put a strategy together until I have all the information that I am comfortable with in order to build a long-term sustainable plan for the housing, the social housing in this borough. And I don't think there's that should be a bone of contention. I think it's actually prudent, which wasn't done previously. We know it wasn't done previously because we found out all the finances for the houses that were, we've had to refinance some of the stock. We brought all that information to the council. It's in the public domain, and it will take as long as it takes for us to get a plan together that is thorough, fully funded and sustainable.
Kondarka, I see you've indicated.
Yeah, following up on that, a fairly short while. You keep blaming the last administration, but you've been in charge for 3 years now. So is there interim plans going on as to what to do until you make up your mind, or your successor makes up their mind what's going on? You've been in charge 3 years. We've got hundreds and hundreds of empty garages. We've got housing projects that need some idea of where they're going. We need more housing. So is there any interim measures in place until you produce your plan?
In measures, there is no change to what we've already put out there in previous strategies from last year. That is the interim measure. And you keep going on about the garages, and I keep telling you about the garages, and you keep going on about housing, and I keep telling you about housing. This is literally a circular conversation, and I've told you time and time again, you keep asking the same questions, you will get the same answer. I am not going to budge on this. And if you think that's irresponsible, if you think being fiscally responsible to be able to put a sustainable and long-term plan together, if you think that's irresponsible, I don't. I think that's what has been needed to happen for a long time. And yeah, we've been in charge for 3 years, and the amount of stuff we've had to unpick in those 3 years is unbelievable. I have said publicly, and more than once, had we not taken over this council when we did, we would be bankrupt. 100% convinced this council would have gone bankrupt had we not taken over and taken some of the interim measures that we've done to change the financial direction. And if you want to carry on with that conversation, take it to the Finance Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But as far as housing is concerned, until I am satisfied that I have a way forward that is fully fundable and sustainable, we won't be moving forwards. I don't think that's an issue.
On this subject, and then I'd like to move on. Councillor Kandaka.
A nice set of financial positions for the general fund on page 87. The financial position of the housing revenue account is impossible to unpick. In the paperwork for the various bits of report, at one stage you've got, I think it's £8.9 billion worth of expenditure in Q2 on one of the pages, page 95. The figures aren't very consistent and impossible to follow. Can you provide members a table similar to the one for the revenue account so that we can see the housing position we're in at the moment? Because I know the 9.8 billion is actually 9.8 million, but that is still a silly number. So on page 95, if you find it, Chair, I say all the numbers we got in this make sense for the revenue, the general fund, but all the housing figures are just gobbledygook.
Where does it say that's miscellaneous expenditure? It doesn't say that, does it, on page 95?
On page 95, it says HRA total, and it's got budget, £250 million, which I think is wrong. Second quarter spending, £8.9 billion.
But it's not miscellaneous expenditure, is it?
I never said miscellaneous.
Okay. Councillor Golby, I'm going to allow you to
I'd just
respond
like a nice table of what the position is.
on that point.
So let's just put that to bed. It's quite clearly not billion. If it was, then we'd be all right, wouldn't we? I mean, all I can say is welcome to my world, mate, because this is what I've been dealing with for the last 3 years, and it's unpicking. It's unpicking stuff. If you want a table that's different, put a request in through the chair can sort that out. But, you're misleading in what you're saying there. I don't really know how to answer that.
Okay, unless there's any other questions from the panel, I'd like to move on to my question to Councillor Golby, which is about right to buy, which is a policy that I absolutely support, and I think it's important that we try and get people onto the property ladder. As per the policy of right to buy, when we sell a property, we retain a receipt, but under normal circumstances, we only retain a small percentage of that. Over the last 2 years, councils have been able to temporarily retain 100% of that receipt, but unfortunately that is coming to an end. Would you, on behalf of the council, consider writing to the Secretary of State to request that 100% right to buy receipts is maintained so that we have the financial ability in our HRA to continue building more social housing?
I will. I haven't got a problem with that because the 100% receipts of right to buy is a big help when we sell the properties. And right to buy is a big help to people that are buying properties who maybe not ordinarily or wouldn't ordinarily be able to afford the house prices that we've got currently. So yeah, I'd be happy to write to the Secretary of State on that.
For Gutteridge, are there any questions for Councillor Gutteridge, Councillor Kandaka?
The paperwork, it mentions how much or how tiny amount we're spending on environmental sustainability, and that we're underspending that by 15,000. We also have all these cycling projects stalled in Nuneaton and Bedworth. And last year, the flood alleviation project for Camp Hill was sabotaged and scrapped, with the money being reallocated, as is the cycling money being reallocated to other stuff. Considering the floods on the 2nd of January, and how are we getting on with the Warwickshire climate change committees you go to in terms of getting some decent mitigation funding for the Nuneaton and Bedworth, and particularly for the flooding, because we were due quite significant flood alleviation works. We were due quite significant cycle improvements, and Warwickshire is slowly moving ahead, and there's obviously this climate change meeting you go to, hopefully. Where are we with getting these adaptations in Nuneaton and Bedworth?
The question, or many questions. Yes, I have attended the Climate Change Committee, and we are looking at getting a substantial grant for the EV chargers in the borough, which I am working with county, and it will be many chargers put across the centre of both towns. Going back to the flood alleviation system, I believe that is county councils. So that's that. Thank you.
A long discussion last time, Councillor Kandaka, about who's got responsibility for flooding, and it's not, I don't see it as a difficult subject. So can we try and steer on to something else?
Chair, EV charging points will help rich people. Poor people will use cycle lanes, they'll want their houses not flooded. We are not getting our share of the climate change mitigation funding. We're not getting our share of the flood alleviation projects. And as we've got a cabinet member who sits on these committees and attends them, he should be shouting, hopefully, to get some of the flood alleviation projects, not just for my part of the borough, but also in Bedworth Woodlands. There are areas where a lot more work needs doing on maintenance and mitigation to cope with an increasingly wet winters. So I think it is fair to ask Councillor Gutteridge what's happening about the funding for flood alleviation. I know we don't fund it, but we are the planning authority and we attend these meetings, hopefully standing up for our borough and the residents who are at risk from flooding.
Councillor Gutteridge, if you've got one more point that you wish to make.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know whether he understands, but we have Warwickshire County Council who have, and there's Nuneaton and Bedworth. We don't have that. Right, going back to your cycle lanes, yes, we are looking at cycle lanes. In fact, at this present time, we have a new cycle lane in a park not far from yourselves, which when we are ready to open it, we will open it. So there is a new cycle lane going in there in the parks. And we are looking to put cycle lanes across most of our parks, eventually when I have the funding.
Questions for Councillor Gutteridge? Nope. Okay, my only question that I've got, Councillor Gutteridge, is a very arcane subject around drainage ditches. Now, I know that in the vast majority of cases, we're not responsible for the maintenance of them, but is the Parks Department putting any pressure on the Environment Agency and also Warwickshire County Council, where they hold responsibility to clear out drainage ditches, some of which haven't been maintained for quite some time now?
I'm putting pressure on the Environment Agency to clean out their ditches, but probably a lot of the ditches that you refer to are probably owned by the County Council, and we are putting pressure on the County Council. And where we have problems with our ditches, we look at cleaning them. In fact, we only just cleaned out a ditch last year that was, well, back end of last year, which was very severe, and we will keep them clean where we can and when we've got costs effectively.
This item, is it completely separate? Is it a completely separate subject?
No, it's about the drainage of our cemeteries.
Okay, I'll allow that. Then I want to move on.
Thank you. It's the cemeteries, but obviously you get water coming on from the land. Did we have a better drainage of our cemeteries during the 2nd of January flooding? Because I didn't get any reports, so hopefully that is getting better. Thank you.
We do have a problem in certain cemeteries with drainage, and in fact we have spoken with the landowner who joins us where the water is coming from. In fact, we've also had a meeting with our MP and briefed him about it, and we are looking at taking this further. He's asking questions down at Westminster about certain areas that we are having problems with water.
I'd like to move on now to our next item, which is item 7, and I'm pleased that we've got Councillor Golby. Did you? Yes, apologies. You said you had an announcement, didn't you? And I did say you could on that. I apologise. Yes.
Good news about the communities team, or should I say our now award-winning communities team. So a few members of my team last week won awards, and it's just, I'd like to announce what they won for and just to congratulate them, because they put in an enormous amount of effort, and it's not always recognisable by people in the council, but it's certainly deserves due recognition. So Abu Malik, who's my head of communities, he received an award for a range of projects which have helped deliver post-COVID re-engagement for some communities, and they include community cohesion events across the borough, domestic violence engagements, liaising with the S&T and the PCC's office. So he has won awards for engaging in all of those activities. And then we've got Michelle Clark and Rowena Musgrave also at the same ceremony won awards for pulling together a big partnership working piece with our local S&T, with in relation to Up Plenty, which was over Christmas, which was to tackle loneliness and isolation. They made it a success by proactively finding and bringing in new partners from the NHS hospital, from the release team at the hospital. So finding residents that needed assistance through the release team at the hospital, through Age UK, through external housing companies to us and our own housing teams, Saints and the community cafes, warm hubs and local churches, and also Carver. And then they were referring those people on to the SNT to get a face-to-face visit from SNT, and then Christmas cards and contact. So they've done a really good job over the last 12 months, and it's been, you know, we've had some big, significant things going on in the town with the Knife Angel, and I'm really pleased to say that we've got a fantastic working relationship with our external partners, and particularly our SNT teams. So they deserve due congratulations for all the work that they're doing, which a lot of it goes unseen, like I say, because a lot of people don't know what they do. You will only find out what they do if you need them, and it's getting to that point. But yeah, a big congratulations to the team on that.
Is it an announcement under this item? Yeah.
Can I just follow on, Bill? I'd like to just say that we had the most hits in total in the year on our Facebook page, the council's Facebook page, was the Knife Angel.
Moving on to item 7, we have representatives from Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service with us this evening to discuss their new delivery model. So I'm very pleased that we've got Chief Fire Officer Brooke and also Councillor Andy Crump, who's the Cabinet Member for Fire Services on Warwickshire County Council. I'm going to ask the Chief Fire Officer to give us a brief update on what the plans are. I'm then going to allow our public speakers to come in and then members. I'll also allow Councillor Crump to come in as well after yourself if needs be.
Just give you a really quick overview of what the proposed changes are and why we're making those changes. So first of all, just to outline some key challenges that Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service is facing and the reason we're making these changes or proposing to make these changes. Firstly, 80% of our activity happens between the hours of 8 in the morning and 10 at night, and yet we have the least fire engines available during that time period. So what we're trying to do through these proposals is put fire engines available when we have most of our activity, which is between 8 in the morning and 10 at night, and that's 80% of our activity. The second challenge we're facing is we have on-call firefighters who are brilliant, and what they are, on-call firefighters are people who, it's not their primary job, they do it in their own time. We pay them for it. They're highly skilled. They're brilliant people. And they sometimes do up to 120 hours on call and have to stay within 5 minutes of the fire station to respond to emergencies. We're finding it more and more difficult to recruit, to attract and to retain people in that model. And our on-call fire engine availability has gone from 90% 5 years ago down to 40% today. So a significant reduction. So you look at that fire engine, that fire station, it may appear to be available, but over 60% of the time it's not available. And in the day, when our risk is highest, our availability is at 19%. So 80% of the time, those fire engines are not available. Our third challenge is response times. So we make a commitment to our communities that we'll get to life and property instance within 10 minutes on 75% of occasions. We haven't met that response standard for 5 years. We want to be really open and transparent with our communities and look at how we can best configure our resources to get to instance as quickly as we possibly can. But be honest that we can't do that on 10 minutes on every occasion in every area of Warwickshire. And then finally, some of our shift systems have been challenged in other parts of the country that we operate in Warwickshire, and therefore they've been legally challenged, and the Fire and Rescue Services where that's happened, they've lost that legal challenge. So we know that we're at risk in that space, so we need to align some of our shift systems to more nationally recognised systems of work. So in this part of Warwickshire, the resource configuration is designed to have the best possible impact and response to the communities. When we look at that, we look at Coleshill, Atherstone, Nuneaton, Bedworth as a whole, and look at the resource configuration across that area, because we're here to serve the whole of Warwickshire, not just one area. But we want to try to provide the very best service we can to the residents of Nuneaton as well. Thank you.
Chief Fire Officer, are you able to give us a brief breakdown of what the compliance changes are going to be by station, specifically for Nuneaton and Bedworth? I appreciate Atherstone and Coleshill does come into this as well, but
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. So Bedworth 24/7 appliances. Under the proposals, that goes to one 24/7 fire engine. Bedworth is currently an on-call fire appliance station. That goes into a fire station which will be manned or staffed between the hours of 8 in the morning and 10 at night. So there'll be a dedicated crews there on that station between 8 in the morning and 10 at night. Coleshill goes from where it's currently available in the day, whole time, but at night it's on call. It goes to being available 24/7. And Atherstone is currently available in the day, on call at night, and that goes to available 24/7.
so we'll retain one compliance.
That's right. They're one appliance currently, and they retain one appliance.
Okay.
But they've been on call at night previously, which isn't always available.
No, sure. And are you able to tell me, anecdotally, before we go on to public speakers, just so I can inform the debate a bit, if there's a very traffic incident on the M6, it's likely that Warwickshire will have to respond to that, and majority of the time it would normally be Bedworth who would respond to that. Am I correct in saying that?
Availability is less than 50%, so less than most of the time, less than 50% of the time, it's available. In the day, when we have the most incidents on the motorway, in other areas, it's much less than that, probably less than 30% availability. So we currently move resources about on a day-by-day basis. Nuneaton's second appliance will roam and go across into that area. So no, it's not correct to say that Bedworth will respond to most of those incidents. Nuneaton will as well.
You wanted to speak on this item, so please do go ahead.
Thank you. Situations that I can think of, and the figures that you've given just sort of don't seem to cover it. I'm under the impression that most incidents need 2 fire appliances attending to them. Certainly the ones we've had recently around us, flooding, there were 2 fire appliances came, and there was a fire in Marston Lane, and that was also 2 appliances. So that, in a fire, I believe there needs to be a certain number of crew present members in order to go in to rescue people and things. So I don't know how that all ties in. I understand that there are less incidents at night, but surely they're harder to deal with. I certainly know that if we had a fire in our house, heaven forbid, that if it was in the night, I know how well I sleep, and trying to get me dozy person, and I'm sure most people are the same, people are sleepy, they've not got their proper shoes or anything like that, maybe just a dressing gown, trying to sort of move them around and tell them what to do must be that much more difficult. So how does that all tie in? And also, in terms of numbers and things, the density of the population and the increase in population that we've had in Nuneaton and things, and yet we seem to be actually losing, fire appliances when, we've got a hell of a lot of people and growing. And also, I know it's not just fire, it's fire and rescue, and we are getting increasing number of floods. And we saw, I think it was the year before last now, the sort of climate change induced wildfires that erupted very, very rapidly. Just on the outskirts of London, wasn't it, near Dagenham, where houses were just engulfed in moments and things. So how would just having 1 appliance here allow people to respond adequately to those sort of things when it sort of will be happening in lots of places at once? Thank you.
Some of those claims.
I'll start off with and then Gus as well. Bit of a double act. I'm probably the straight man to Ben's comedy act. Got a few points there. I'm glad you mentioned the flooding, because I've got the flooding portfolio at the county as well, so I'll be able to speak to Kent and Gutteridge about drains and gullies and riparian ownership, so I'm more than happy to do that. But you mentioned the flooding and the wildfires, and this is the whole point of having the search teams. So currently we've got 11 full-time pumps plus 12 on-call. Invariably, if we're lucky, only 1, maybe 2 of those are available during the day. As we know, the 40 degrees temperatures in 2022 happened between 12 o'clock, midday, and 6 p.m. When we got least availability. We're talking about the flooding as well. We all know that the flooding doesn't suddenly materialise out of the water and is there with it needing a 5-minute call-up. We know that if it rains 50 miles upstream, that's going to come down to certain parts of the county within 2 hours. Therefore, we can move and call these surge or on-call teams back to meet the demand. And no pun intended on this occasion, and I know Councillor Condercall loves my puns, we literally ran out of pumps during the flood. We didn't have enough availability to meet our demand, trying to call the on-call firefighters back because they weren't available during the day. With this surge team, the 8 pumps, we would be able to bring those back on a phased basis on up to 2-hour recall. So therefore, if we knew these wildfires were taking place or were happening, or the floods, we could get our resources back. And in terms of the fires, we had that temperature. They were wearing PPE, 40-degree heat, and lots of our firefighters were suffering from heat exhaustion. So therefore, they needed relieving. So again, they could have been brought back on a phase stop. So that is some of the issues. About the other thing as well, sometimes we failed if we have to go out. We need to ensure we do enough prevention and protection work so people have got working fire alarms, smoke alarms. They shut the doors at night, make sure everything's turned off, don't overload plugs. And that's one of the things. And we talk about population increase. Newer houses are more likely to be safer than older houses, usually, because they've got built-in smoke alarms, they've got better electrics, they've got newer appliances, they've got built to a better standard, usually, I can't say all the time, but usually, and have built-in safety measures as well. So it doesn't mean to equate more houses means more demand, because if that was the case throughout the country, the population has increased significantly, we would have needed more fire and rescue services. So hopefully that answers some of the points, and then Ben will fill the gaps that I've missed.
Very quick, just a couple of points, just around the number of incidents that require 2 fire engines. So 89% of our incidents are not life and property and only require 1 fire appliance, so it's actually a small number of incidents that require. Thankfully, house fires are reducing, not increasing. In relation to at night, 68% of fatalities actually happen in the day, not at night. So we need to change that. We have less fires at night. And then just want to say this new resource configuration for this area of the county improves response times to life and property incidents by 35 seconds.
We did have another public speaker, but that individual hasn't attended, so we're going to move straight on to members. Are there any members who have any points that they would like to raise? Councillor Shires.
Hi, thanks for that. You've mentioned about you're struggling to retain staff and to get on-call officers. What are you actually, I've got quite a few questions, but to start off with that, so what are you actually doing to encourage people to join the fire service, and then to, once they're in the fire service, to actually stay? And what is happening? Is there any something to do with the fact that actually resources are being stripped from the fire service, as with others, that people, that fire officers leave? I know you're shaking your head there, County Councillor Crump, so if you can just answer sort of like of what you're doing to retain, that'd be great, thanks.
Yeah, I'll do what we've done about recruitment. We have no challenges there for recruitment, so for every position we try to fill, we probably have nearly 700 applicants, so we do not have an issue, and retention isn't an issue for our whole-time firefighters either. Generally they do 30 or 40 years service with us. We're talking very specifically around on-call firefighters that have to live within 5 minutes of a station and be available within 5 minutes of that station for between 40 hours a week and 120 hours a week. We've had a community engagement officer put in place to try and attract people. We do advertising on social media. We've had a 22-point plan to try and improve that. We've also done some research actually around our communities, and the volunteering and the desire to actually do things in people's own time. Now, this isn't a volunteering role, it's a paid role, is becoming very, very challenging. So it's not just us, it's actually reservists for the armed forces. It's lots of areas that it's become really challenging, and people just seem to either not be able to afford to live within 5 minutes of our on-call stations, or they are not wanting to dedicate that amount of time. So it's a real struggle for us.
Can I come back in on the resourcing? Yep. Yes, there's a couple of things on that. We are basically, there will be, if the proposal goes through as is, we are subject to, our minds being changed on things, but, we're doing meaningful consultation and we want to listen to what our residents are saying. If the proposals stay exactly as they are, there's a £14,000 saving on the total budget of fire and rescue of 24 million. So a minuscule amount, and I used to work as accountant in local government for 30 years, and if I got my budgets within 14,000 on a 24 million pound budget, I'd be running up and down shouting about that. So it's not a saving, it's trying to resource to where the risk is. And I don't know whether you've seen on the news recently, Hereford and Worcestershire Fire and Rescue are taking away 8 pumps from on-call stations, potentially making 43 on-call firefighters redundant, and moving resources from that area to frontline whole time. It's because their demand has changed, and they are also struggling to recruit on-call firefighters.
Councillor Shires.
Okay, so we've also got the hotel that's currently being built, which is one of the bigger developments in the area, and it currently, from what I can gather, has no sprinkler system within it. So if, and it is like a God forbid, something was to happen there, would we be able, with one fire engine, to deal with that if that was to happen?
In certain buildings, so it will be being built to building regs. Our fire protection teams will be involved in that, making sure it's got the right escape routes, protected corridors, smoke alarms, all those sort of things. Secondly, if we had a hotel fire, it wouldn't be Nuneaton's appliances now that just deal with it. There'll be resources from all over the county. It's not Nuneaton's fire engines that deal with incidents in Nuneaton. We move fire engines around the county all the time. So if we had an incident that was that significant, would be moving resources from all around the county. But across the whole of Warwickshire, would also be calling probably support from other fire and rescue services as well. And just to emphasise again, the response time would be quicker for the first appliance, and getting the second appliance from Bedworth would be quick alongside Atherston and Coleshill, but would pull resources from the whole of Warwickshire. So we'd never just deal with that just with Nuneaton's appliance.
Sorry, but then my thoughts are, so if, God forbid again, there was the fire there, and from what I can gather, I think Councillor Conticore and Councillor Watkins have been around, and I've had information that say that the fire service haven't actually been that involved with the hotel. But if we're bringing fire services from across Coleshill, Atherston, Bedworth, etc., just to deal with one incident here, what then if there was another serious incident somewhere else? I'm sure you can appreciate we actually live here, so for obviously us it's our lives, it's our children's lives, etc. So this is actually quite important to residents. So it really is a case of, if you were then pulling resources from everywhere else, what about those areas if something was to happen? What cost are you putting on people's lives generally?
People's lives at all. As you say, I think I disagree with that totally. If there was a major fire, we have to have resources from different parts of the county and cross-border to start off with. The two pumps at Bedworth, or the two pumps here, wouldn't be able to deal with that. That's what Mr. Brook was saying. Secondly, the whole point of these proposals is to have resources available on an up to 2-hour callback, but not necessarily a 2-hour callback. It could be less than that. It depends on negotiations with the employee organisations. And that is the whole point of bringing people back in to backfill those other areas if they were needed. So if there was this incident at the hotel, it took about 4 or 5 different pumps from different parts of the county, we would then be able to call back other areas, other surge teams, to come back in and backfill where those other pumps have come from. So that's why we're producing extra resources to do so. So currently, as I said, Mr. Brook is lucky to have 12 or 13 pumps available guaranteed during the day. Under this proposal, he could have up to 20.
Already happens on a day-to-day basis. If we had a large fire in Leamington, we'd pull the resource out of Nuneaton. That's what we do currently. We have to move resources around Warwickshire on a day-by-day basis based on risk and what's going on. You know, it really is important that, you know, the two fire engines that are sat at Nuneaton don't just sit there. We'll move them throughout the county to deal with a range of different things on a day-to-day basis, depending where the activity is.
Beyond being a bit stupid here, I still don't. So you're going to move them around. That's fair enough. That's what you do in business. You put your resources to where it is. I don't see though how removing a fire engine from Nuneaton is going to increase your ability to tackle accidents, fires, etc. When you could just leave it at Nuneaton as it is now, and then just have it roaming. I don't know why it needs to actually move from Nuneaton.
So what we're doing is reconfiguring Bedworth doesn't have much availability there at all. So by moving fire appliances, Atherstone, like I've described, that's at night is on call. It won't be anymore. So in this area of the county, covering this area, you've got better distribution of resources that can come in from all different angles into Nuneaton if that happens as well, which is helpful. So it's the whole resource configuration that is better for this area. If you just look at Nuneaton, it just doesn't work like that. You have to look at where the resource configuration is across the north of the county, and it's better under the new model.
No. Okay. Councillor Hartshorn.
So I understand that the second full-time appliance from Nuneaton is to be moved to Bedworth. There is already an appliance there. I'm just assuming it is moving the crew over. So what would happen to the second physical appliance at Nuneaton? Is it going to stand there as an on-call pump, or is it going to be transferred out to Atherstone, Coleshill, wherever?
So what we will do is currently we have 23 fire appliances. What this does is takes us to 20. Just very clear, we never have 23 appliances on the run. Our average is 11 or 12 in the day, potentially 15 at night is what we look and feel like. That's our average resource availability. So there are some fire appliances that stand still at the moment. What we're going to do is make sure every single fire station has a fire engine, but Nuneaton will have one fire engine, and that will be crewed 24/7 at Nuneaton.
Councillor. Okay, Councillor Kandaka.
Privilege of going on Monday night to hear a lot of questions. And the very last question you ducked and didn't answer, and your mind has prevented being answered, which I thought was a very good question about breathing apparatus policy. So we have 4 on a crew on a fire engine, and when you arrive, you need, I'm told, 5 to safely do a breathing apparatus entry into a house, etc. And the chap there, I assume had some fire experience from the way he talked, was concerned about what your policies were in terms of putting the firemen at risk and them going into something against rules, etc. And the big thing we lose in Nuneaton with these changes is the second appliance attending time. The fire station is just there. We get a fire engine very quickly. The second one, which provides the extra crew, if they're coming from Atherstone in the morning rush hour or up from Bedworth in the morning rush hour, would be a considerable delay. So we're very concerned about that second fire engine in Nuneaton, and we want to know what's happening with this breathing apparatus policy and how we mitigate for that. I mean, one solution is to have 5 crew on rather than 4, which I think is what you used to have before the previous cuts. So can you explain what the policy is and how we're going to be safe?
Some of the busiest fire stations have been to lots and lots of house fires. The ridership in Warwickshire is we ride at 4. That's currently the situation. People can be at a house fire on their own with a crew of 4. There is something within our policies called exceptional circumstances and rapid deployment, where you can deploy when life is at risk. So we can absolutely do that. We'll get a second appliance there as quickly as we possibly can. Under these arrangements, we're much more likely, depending where it is, to get there quicker first, to make the first intervention. And in this area, you'll get a second appliance very, very quickly.
On the cut, it effectively we lose £1.1 million worth of firefighters. You've got your 2 crews and then your shifts. So you told me to keep the firemen was about £1.1 million. And that's money lost to the local economy. But those firemen are also doing lots of useful stuff. We've got this integrated scheme for the frail and things. And there's been lots of good stuff the fire service has been doing. So not only do we have the whammy of losing those fire crews to Nuneaton, we also probably have less of the things going on which are beneficial. So I would like a compromise and to have a daytime 12-hour crew and then a 24-hour crew, which is halfway on the money. But yeah, can we seriously look at what we're doing as a compromise, and can you explain what services we lose by only having 1 crew rather than 2?
Just so people at home are watching, these are not cuts. We need to use our language very clearly on this. These are not cuts. It is simply redesigning a delivery of a service to make sure it is where the demand is. Councillor Crump.
Yeah, you did mention previous cuts at Councillor Cundlark, and I think that was 2010. Previous cuts implies that these are cuts and they're not. It's resource allocation. What I've got to say is, first of all, when you talk about it's firefighters, not firemen, So I've got you a couple of times. I know it's easy to do, and we all know Fireman Sam. My children were brought up on Fireman Sam, so, but it's firefighters. We've got to get that point across. I think that's quite a serious point there. But you've also got to acknowledge that these appliances and firefighters are not Nuneaton's Fire and Rescue. It's Warwickshire Fire and Rescue. I'm responsible, and Mr. Brook is, for the residents of the whole of Warwickshire. So you might see resources being moved around, but they don't belong to you. They belong to Warwickshire, not Nuneaton, not Nuneaton Bedworth, Coleshill, Southam, my station, my area. So, yeah, it's putting resources to where the risks are at the right time, at the right place. So it's, if we wanted to stay the same, there's one thing we didn't touch upon, is that HMI CFRS, which is His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue, actually was concerned, or got an area for improvement on the way we allocated our resources. And they've said, we are pleased to see that the service is evaluating its mix of crewing and duty systems, so it will be able to demonstrate how it responds efficiently to risk and incidents. So basically, we've been told by the equivalent of external audit to look at what we're doing and make sure we are providing the best resources at the right time and the right place. The status quo is not acceptable. Even the FRSA, which is the on-call employee body, have said, what they've said, if I can really write it, the status quo is not an option. Swift action and innovative proposals are needed. They are a critic of what we're doing, but they acknowledge that status quo is not an option. And if we'd got the availability we had 10 years ago, I wouldn't be coming here. I wouldn't have been stuck in traffic for an hour and 20 minutes and being late, so I do apologise. So, yeah, we've got to make sure we use our resources to our best ability and best availability. And like Mr. Brooks says, the on-call firefighters do a great job, but lots of them work during the day and they are not available. And what we're going to do as well is that because of sometimes if we go out to an incident, we failed, particularly around house fires, because sometimes we can get to house fires and we're too late, and they've got there well within the response time. So as part of this, we're freeing up extra resources because we've got more staff available during the day to do more prevention and protection work. A 13.2% increase in the amount of that prevention and protection work in identifying issues, because we all know, was it a stitch in time saves 9 and prevention is better than cure.
Councillor Crump, I'm going to allow one more contribution on this item from you, Councillor Kandaka, and then I'd like to move on. Councillor Kandaka.
Per fire engine, 4 people. There's 2 lots of shifts, so that's 8 to man a fire engine for a day. You've got 2 fire engines, so that's 16, and then they're on 4 on, 4 off, so that's 32. So at the moment we have roughly 32 plus obviously managers and people for covering holidays. 32 people looking after our lives in Nuneaton. The proposals that will go down to 16, which will save you £1.1 million. That saving is being used to solve the problems in other parts of the county, which I totally accept you have. Yeah, the on-call system does need strengthening and replacing in this new model. That's great for those places. Rugby keeps 2 fire engines. Leamington keeps 2 fire engines. Nuneaton goes from 2 to 1. What I would like to ask you to seriously consider, please reply to this, is having effectively 1 full-time crew and 1 12-hour crew. That goes from 32 people to 24 rather than 32 to 16. That would give us more resources in the most fire-affected part of Warwickshire. We get more fires. Our crews are not idle in Nuneaton and Bedworth. The Nuneaton crews, if you look at the call-out rate, 1,300 I think call-outs a year for the 2 crews. They're very busy. If you look at Bedford, I think it was 18 call-outs a year. Yeah, we do have an awful lot of fires, so I seriously ask you to look at a crewing model that gives us 2 fire engines, even if one of them is only there for 12 hours a day. because that is something we can build back from. If we lose 16 firefighters, that is catastrophic and we'll never get them back. So I do ask you to consider Nuneaton and consider giving us less of a cut. And I'll keep calling.
For us to respond, I do need to make it clear, as I understand, the borough is not losing a compliance. And I think it's important. I think it's important for people at home to understand that. I'm going to allow the chief fire officer to respond to your point.
Available and guaranteed to be available. I'm not sure it's actually a question, Councillor, so I don't know what to respond to that really, because it wasn't a question, but feel free to put within the consultation your suggestions, because I think it was a suggestion of how you think we could improve it rather than a question. So I can't answer that now because it's part of the consultation. Feed that into the consultation.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I just want to come on some points myself. First, I'll put these all together. I just wondered, when I was reading through this report and looking at where all our stations are located, etc., obviously Coventry Airport does technically come under Warwickshire, not the West Midlands. I know it's on the boundary, but are we responsible for fire provision at Coventry Airport? And if so, where does that fit into this new model? The second point I wanted to raise is a general comment, I suppose, around equipment. So we're talking about compliance this, compliance that, but am I right in saying that if there was a bin fire, we wouldn't necessarily send an entire compliance out, would we? We would. I remember we used to have like the converted 4x4 Land Rover Defenders. Do we still have those? And if so, are you able to tell us briefly what the breakdown of those are locally? And also, again, when I was looking at where our location of stations are, and I know just you obviously mentioned earlier about the retention and recruitment of on-call firefighters. I know that the discussion around where fire stations are located, I know that it can be a very politically contentious thing to discuss, and I know it's a very easy subject for people to sort of, hit councillors and politicians over the head with, but I do think we need to have an honest debate about the location of our fire stations in Warwickshire, and perhaps, and I'm not sort of proposing this because I'm not an expert in this, but have we looked at locations like the Bermuda Industrial Estate as potential locations? If especially given its proximity to the motorways, etc., and given it's a central part of the borough. So if you could sort of touch on those points, I'd be grateful.
The airport. So the airport, depending on the size of the aeroplanes that are coming, have to provide their own fire and rescue service. We support them, absolutely do support them, but it depends on the size of air. So for Coventry Airport, they have a fire and rescue service capability there. We support them in that though, so we absolutely will do that. Thankfully, it's a fairly low risk. We don't very often have aircraft coming in, but we absolutely can deal with that. It's not just airport that do that. So Defence Munitions Kyneton have their own defence fire and rescue service as well. Really important to say, we also assess all new risks across Warwickshire. So all of our firefighters go out and assess new risks alongside our prevention and protection team. So it is part of what we do. In relation to small fires in our fleet and how the fleet is made up, it's mainly made up of full fire appliances. But what we do is if we can't get the full crewing level, so we can only have 3 people on a fire appliance, we'll still mobilise that fire appliance, but only to small fires. But generally, across Warwickshire, because of our geography, we can't have a specialist resource for this and a specialist resource for that. One vehicle that can respond to everything absolutely makes sense. We do have some specialist capability, so we've got a specialist road traffic collision capability, we've got a special animal rescue capability, we've got a specialist flood rescue capability within Warwickshire. So we have got a number of specialist vehicles, but the majority of our fleet are made up of the fire plants that are traditionally there. In relation to new buildings, new risks, under the National Framework Document for Fire and Rescue Services in England, we have to assess risk on a regular basis. So we do that every 3 years maximum. We usually actually do it on an annual basis. So we do review and look at risk. And I really want to emphasise the fact that when we review risk again, it might have changed. We might need to remove fire appliances again around Warwickshire. That needs to be starting to be in the thinking of our communities, that we're not a static service where this is exactly where a resource will be. Much like the ambulance, much like the police, we need to be much more dynamic in how we use our resources based on risk. So if risk changes, we'll look at that and we'll move fire appliances around again.
We work on a Balloon Light collaboration partnership with the police and occasionally West Midlands Ambulance and a few other partners as well. As we all know, if we could have a clean map of and start again with our fire stations, lots of them wouldn't be where they are today, particularly in the south. And it's some of those are unsustainable. So we are trying to see where the best locations are. We are, again, trying to share resources as well, which makes sense. And that, and we see some of the fire stations have had equipment taken from them, particularly in the south, been broken in because the criminals have been able to use the equipment for nefarious purposes. But we are, again, trying to make those secure and working with our partners. So we are looking at exploring different locations, and that was one of them. And it depends also on how developments happen, big builds, etc., and whether things can be moved around and etc. It's the Warwickshire County Council's property people are involved as well in terms of looking at locations. But you're right, half the stations we've got now wouldn't be there if we could redesign them, because the risk has changed. Obviously, even the M40 wasn't built in until late 80s, wasn't it? Early 90s. And I think we've got the most motorways in Warwickshire throughout the whole of the West Midlands. So, and we all know, but even though they're supposed to be one of the safer, best roads of transport, we still have incidents, and sometimes they can be really serious. So, yes, thank you for the question.
Close. Obviously, I hope that members, if they have concerns or suggestions or proposals, feed those into the consultation. And as the Chief Fire Officer sort of highlighted, that these things are always under review. If demand changes, we have to look at where resources go. And if this system, this model doesn't work, I'm confident that Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service will just accept that, move on, and change and adapt. And but for me, my view on these matters has always been that we have to make sure that the resources are where the demand lies, and at the end of the day, it's our firefighters on the ground who are the experts in this subject area. And if this is the model that they believe will work, I think we need to be seen to support them. So on that note, I'm going to move on. Chief Fire Officer, thank you very much for your attendance, and Councillor Crump, thank you for attending as well. And we hope that you get lots of responses to the consultation to go through in due course. Thank you. You can stay for the rest of the meeting, but we're talking about air quality, so probably not. Thank you. Thank you. So, our next item is item 8. It's air quality management, the monitoring of the current air quality management areas, and discussion about what is done to mitigate these. We have Andrew Snowden, who is our senior environmental health officer at the council, and you've got a report that you wish to present to the committee. Andrew, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm not sure how many of the committee were sort of present last year, and so I don't want to sort of duplicate too much if people are already aware of it. So I'm just going to give a very brief background of air quality management and what the requirements are on the local authority, before just picking out the key points from our last reporting year, which is 2022, from our annual status report. A couple of brief updates, and then one key point for discussion really around our initial air quality management area that we first declared back in 2009, I believe. So I'll just begin by saying that all local air quality is directed by the Environment Act 1995, with some updates from the Environment Act 2021. This requires the local authority to consider key pollutants. So there's a longer list, but the key pollutants really that actually, in reality, local authorities end up dealing with are nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, and on rare occasions, sulfur dioxide. There are others, but there's not been any management areas declared for other reasons. For example, ozone. We had new technical guidance come out in the autumn of 2022 and policy guidance, and this is our first reporting year under that guidance. So there's a few small changes from that, particularly around air quality management area, one which we'll come to, but also some things like needing to get the report signed off by the Warwickshire Director of Public Health. We've done that. So as I say, there is a slightly different feel from DEFRA in terms of assessing our reports this year. Oh, this is working differently to my screen. Just bear with me a sec, because the screen doesn't move.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I'll just get back to where I thought we were.
Technology is absolutely terrible. Said it for years.
Yeah. There we are. So, so just to confirm, what we're actually talking about is air quality data obtained in 2022, because we report that data throughout to DEFRA throughout 2023. They appraise our reports and then come back to us during the year, and then at this time of year we typically come back. So what we're talking about is what happened in 2022, which is quite interesting because that's the first year really post-pandemic when we can start to say that the roads had returned to anything like normal or the new normal. Because generally regarded 2020 and 2021 as years that were obviously notably impacted by reduced traffic. So we can start to draw a few more conclusions than we could say last year and certainly the year before. In general terms, we monitor at 38 sites across the borough for nitrogen dioxide, and we use the small NOx tubes, as we call them, that are just shown on the right-hand side there. There's probably a few tubes on one or two positions on the edge of the map there missing, but this is the locations we monitor in Bedworth. You'll have seen in the report for the full detail to have a proper look at, because you probably can't see the specific locations there, but that's the same in Nuneaton. There's certainly one or two tubes missing just because of the way the map is framed in the report. So, for example, down towards the long shoot, but that's a good bulk of the tubes there from Nuneaton. So yeah, we take those tubes out, start of the month, they collect nitrogen dioxide for that month, they're sent away to the lab, and then we get a monthly figure for nitrogen dioxide in that location. So we obviously get 12 rounds of monitoring every year, and then we report that to DEFRA during the following year. This, as I say, this is the results of our 2023 annual status report, our ASR. So, as it says there, we had an overall reduction of 1.5% from the year before. And I think that is particularly interesting because, as I say, 2021 was still impacted by COVID. So to be overall down on that, I think is quite notable. 22 sites of those 38 were reduced, 13 increased and 2 staying the same. Going back to 2011, we were monitoring in the same way, and we'd identified elevated nitrogen dioxide in the Midland Road, Central Avenue, Corporation Street area. So we have an air quality management area declared there, and this plan and drawing is that air quality management area. And what we tend to do in an air quality management area is to have more saturation of monitoring sites within it. So there's a high density of NOx tubes in the area than there would be, say, outside, for example. So we can build a picture of what's happening. So this is the Midland Road AQMA. I mention this because I need to talk a little bit more about the... I was going to say, this is Air Quality Management Area 2. I've put this first because we just need to talk a bit more about Air Quality Management Area 1, so it's a bit back to front. On the drawings earlier on, I did have them numbered, but I thought that's kind of confusing, so I'll just put the names. So this is Air Quality Management Area 2, so this was declared second, but this has been compliant in 2020, 2021 and 2022. But as I say, there's not a huge amount of information you can draw from the 2 years affected by the pandemic. So interestingly, the lighter two bars are 2018 and 19, and particularly for tubes NB 29 and 30, which for a long while have been the tubes that were in exceedance of the government objectives. They obviously pre-pandemic were higher and were just over the threshold. They were then lower during the pandemic, as you'd perhaps expect. But then, interestingly, for 2022, that reduction has been sustained. So interesting. In terms of what we need to do, that we wouldn't draw conclusions based on that. That is a case of ongoing monitoring now to see whether that's a sustained change. So this year it's compliant, but obviously we need to just see if that remains the case. This is Air Quality Management Area 1, so this was first declared in 2009, I believe. Leicester Road gyratory, and you can just see the saturation of tubes that we have there. This one is the one we need to talk a little bit more about because of the extent of compliance. So if I just draw your attention to the scale on the left-hand side, the annual mean concentration, you can note that the scale is different on this one, and so even the highest levels are just so from sort of 2018, and at the highest tubes are just tipping over the 30 mark. So this has been compliant for quite some time, and has dropped significantly, really, into the pandemic as expected, and has stayed like that. And this is what really, one of the key points we need to discuss is, and it comes to that changing guidance that I mentioned at the start. So the TG and PG 22 came in the autumn of 2022, and this takes a lot stronger stance on air quality management areas that are compliant effectively. So I believe it's been compliant for it's 10 years, and they look particularly about whether it's been within 10% of the objective for 3 years. So they took a lot stronger line when they came back to us in our appraisal this year and said it needs to be revoked. Now, when we were doing our action plan for our updated action plan going back a couple of years, members at Cabinet wanted to retain it because of the housing developments, but and that's what happened. It could have, the option was there to revoke at that point, but this stronger guidance from DEFRA really pushes us down that route to revoke it. So it'll be a point for members to discuss. They've said that they won't look at anything relating to air quality management areas that should be revoked. So they're not going to appraise, because they appraise all the reports that come through and sort of sign them off. They won't consider that and that it needs to be revoked. It is quite substantially below the threshold, and the trajectory obviously is downwards. So that's one we'll need to come back to. Just a couple of updates. You've perhaps seen in the report, obviously the measures are set out in those categories. Just a couple of small updates really. Members will perhaps already be aware that I think the Abbey Green cycleway that's referenced is on hold at the moment, pending it being linked up with cycle schemes in the town centre. So I think in our report it perhaps said that that was happening and due to happen last year, but as I understand it, that's not happening at the moment. The controlling domestic emissions, we've got a duty, PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, which is the very sort of, not the smallest particulate matter, but one of the smallest, is a government function, a central government function to meet levels relating to that, but the local authority has a duty to sort of contribute to that. So a lot of the measures that we take to improve air quality anyway are help with that. Now, it's reasonably well known now that sort of domestic wood burning and domestic solid fuel burning contributes quite significantly to that. So we're looking to sort of do a bit of work on solid fuel burning. So there are under the Environment Act from 21, there were new powers that came in relation to smoke control offences. That's available where, where we have complaints or are aware of problems. I must say this year, slightly surprisingly, given cost of living crisis and all this kind of stuff, we've not received many complaints concerning smoke control areas and emissions of smoke from domestic properties in smoke control areas, but we are prepared to use those powers if we need to, but it's been surprisingly quiet on that front. We are planning, because as you'll know, the council's changing its website sort of imminently, really. We are planning on updating some of our information and perhaps putting some promotion of educational stuff out there in relation to smoke control and the new requirements around ready-to-burn fuel and that sort of stuff. So we're going to think about that through the warmer weather so that we're ready to go for next winter and put that information out there just to try and contribute towards that objective, really. So I think that's the very briefest of overview, because I really wanted to leave it to the panel for points that you want to follow up on and can expand as necessary. And also to obviously give consideration to a recommendation for revocation of the Leicester Road Gyratory AQMA. So over to the panel.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Mrs. Kandaka, you're down to speak on this item, so I'm happy for you to start now. I don't need the timer, it's fine. Just sit within the 3 minutes.
Thank you. Obviously, air quality, we only monitor for the nitrous dioxide, and yet PM, particulate matter is probably an increasing issue, particularly with the size of the particles. Is there no way that the developers could be made to actually contribute, so we could actually monitor that and see what's happening there? I know we've not got things, but the World Health Organization recommendations are for much lower levels, so I'm always very aware of, oh yeah, it's all okay, but really it's not okay, because we should be working to much lower targets to get under them. Also, it's on average that there was or mean or whatever, there was a drop. Now, I find that a bit worrying to use the sort of average and things, because 13 sites showed an increase, and, what are you doing about that? It's no good saying, oh, overall it's okay, because if you happen to have one of these 13 sites right outside your front door, you wouldn't think it was okay at all. And the other thing really is actually the implementation of the action plan. There's some very good things in there and things, but it's just not happening. There was mentioned in the report, the work underway to tackle the climate emergency. What work? There is no work going on specifically here in the borough that seems to be to tackle the climate emergency and enhancing cycling infrastructure. And yet this council's got councillors, including the leader, who seem completely against this. They don't want you to be able to cycle through the town centre and things. Now, people will still cycle through the town centre, so you've got to give them designated routes and things. And same in Bedworth. Going through the town centre is the only route for cyclists that actually makes any sense, because it's jolly hard going down the Right Peace Ringway and back up, and the other route is, taking life in your hands with all the people turning into and out of Tesco's and things. So I really want to see action being actually taken to really get the air quality action plan actually being utilised to get reductions. Yeah, thank you.
Were there any comments you wanted to make, Andrew, on that?
Yeah, I can come back on a few of those. In terms of developers and monitoring particulates, we used to monitor, because the local authority requirement is relating to particulate matter PM10, so slightly larger than the PM2.5. We used to monitor for that, and it never showed a problem. So a decision was taken, but some time ago, actually, before I was involved, to shut the monitoring station that we had for that. We've nothing to suggest that PM2.5 PM10 is even close to the threat. It was very low relative to the objective that the government had set. PM2.5, as I say, is a central government objective. It's for DEFRA to meet that, but with local authorities contributing. But it is the way they worded it is slightly vague, so it's very much that we have to help as much as we can, but fundamentally it's for DEFRA to meet. Now, in terms of monitoring it is quite expensive. You know, you need a proper monitor to do it. DEFRA because they have a network of monitoring sites all around the country. Now, they're putting one in Bedworth. I'm not sure if it's operational yet, but if it's not, it's fairly imminently operational. And so that's going in, and I forget, I should know, but off the top of my head, somewhere, it will come to me in a minute, near Nuneaton Road anyway. So they're going to be monitoring PM2.5 with that and PM10. So we'll have that data is accessible to anybody, but it'll be accessible to us. Their modelling previously has shown that we would be compliant with the new with the interim targets anyway, which is 12 and 10 by 2040. So I think the highest level they had was 12, and that was down near towards the M6. But the anticipation was that would fall. But that's what DEFRA will be doing. They'll be monitoring it, and we'll have that information. So there will be monitoring happening. I know you point about World Health Organization levels, and there's not really much for me to come back on this, except to say yes, they do recommend lower levels than currently central government do. The 13 sites that have increased, yeah, they're ones we need to watch. I mean, again, I'd come back to the point that this is 2022 data, so this was potentially rising slightly from the pandemic time, and now we need to see what happens with those going forward. So yes, we've noted the increase. We'll continue to monitor it. The key point to make in terms of compliance is that those 13 sites are still compliant. It's what the trend is. So do they continue to go up or do they continue to fall? That's what we need to see. But it's marking the transition from 2021 to 22, which I think is important to note. Yeah, cycling infrastructure. Obviously, that's a county matter in terms of they drive the cycling infrastructure. We try and raise air quality the agenda with them and to try and encourage the projects that they have planned and make sure that we can try and push it as far as we can through the steering group that we have. So the cycling, I don't know his job title, but the guy who runs the cycling infrastructure plan, the cycling walking infrastructure development plan, he comes to the air quality steering groups. Obviously, we're pushing hard to get them to do everything they can on cycling infrastructure, but ultimately it is in their hands as to implementing those measures.
Thank you, Andrew.
For thing, but can I just make one comment on that?
I'm going to allow you to make one comment.
One comment, yeah. Yes, I realise that it's county that sort of actually do the cycling sites and things, but the borough on all levels, in all departments, needs to be actually supporting that, and that's what we're not seeing.
Thank you, Mrs. Kandaka. I think your point has been made. So I'm now going to open this up to members, and Councillor Hartshorn, you were the first to indicate.
Thank you, Chair. So, being brand new to this committee, I'm presuming that the emissions levels being monitored are massively impacted by the congestion of cars along that route. With the Midland Road sites, they will be massively impacted by the rush hour periods, correct? So, has any work been done with County to arrange to test different timings of the lights at Midland Road, Manor Court Road, to see what impact that would have in alleviating that during the evening rush hour coming out of the town centre, and then also seeing about timings with the lights outside Asda towards the railway station, as that will affect it going in and going up towards Weddington. Adversely, that would also have an effect on the stuff coming through from the Weddington impact zone. So can you give me an update as to what work's been going on with that?
That's a fair question, I think, Andrew.
I'm not aware of specific work recently, since I've been involved with this, in that specific question to highways. But as I understand it, highways do work on optimisation from a traffic flow point of view constantly anyway. They're regularly reviewed because obviously, even if you take air quality out of the equation, they don't want congestion anyway. But it's a question I can put to them at the steering group, which will take place in the subsequent sort of 2 or 3 months. So I'll ask the question. Obviously, the Transforming Nuneaton programme that they've got, there's works planned for sort of Corporation Street. So whether it falls in with that, but I appreciate that's something that could be a standalone thing. But I do think they do look at it anyway, because there'd be no interest in them having congestion that was avoidable, I suppose.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Thank you for agreeing to raise that with the steering group. Yeah, I drive that route at minimum 4 times a day along Midland Road, and yeah, it would be useful for them to have a serious look at that, not only just from a congestion point of view, but from an air quality point of view. That I have a feeling that would drastically fall off, allow the emissions to fall off to much more acceptable levels, potentially even to what Mrs. Kandaka was hoping for.
There we go. That point has been noted, I think. I think, Councillor Kandaka, you indicated. Now, I know you could talk for hours on end about this specific subject, but if we can try and keep your points toned down, that would be helpful.
Chair, I can speak for days on this subject, particularly around the borough plan modelling. But it's interesting what was said earlier about traffic light phasing, because a long while ago they were looking at the lights as you come down Tuttle Hill in terms of holding a bit of traffic up there. If it was queuing across Midland Road, Corporation Street, the worst thing you can have is a lot of lorries and cars intermixed, all jammed in the same area, very close to housing. So a lot of technology can do this sort of clever stuff of, if there's going to be a queue because the cat will get into Asda, moving the queue so it's a bit more spread out. But that relies on really good technology in terms of measuring pollution. And this is where these diffusion tubes that put up once a month are totally useless. They don't tell you whether it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday when it's bad or it's midnight. So we do need at least 1 or 2 monitoring points in the town, and probably definitely in Bedworth as well, that are actually real time, so they give you a graph. They don't need to be particularly accurate, but they need to be very good at measuring trends. And technology has moved on. We're talking about the 1995 pollution laws. Yeah, 29 years old all this stuff is based on. And going through Parliament with attempts to make clean air a human right. And we have probably 10, 20 or 30 people in the borough dying early each year due to air pollution. Even when it's compliant, people will have asthma attacks, heart attacks, all the various things and dementia.
Sorry, just to...
Don't argue with me on this.
I'm not arguing, but do you have any evidence to support that? Because that's quite a bold claim that 20 to 30 people are dying for that reason.
Yeah, it is well known.
Is there anything from the World Health Organisation or the NHS locally, or...?
Nationally, it is in all the stats, and the report quite often tells you how many years have lost. So it's proper information, Kyle. Look it up.
Which page is it on?
I don't know in this year's report.
Because I haven't seen it.
My wife will look for it while I'm carrying on with my speech.
Okay, thank you.
And fundamentally, if you look at somewhere like Midland Road, where the houses are right on the road, the air impact of 20 or 30 parts per million of NO2 is appalling. So we should do everything we can, even if we get it from 35 to 30, that is less asthma attacks, etc. And the other thing that's wrong with the historic way of things we're doing, they didn't measure the pollution of people walking down the road. Your children going to schools in Bedworth or Nuneaton, they're going next to the road, not where you've got your diffusion tubes. So there's a lot of things we need to do. We could gain a lot of years extra life, and years of extra healthy life if we had cleaner air. So I hope you'll understand, Carl, that making it better, even if it's below the legal limit, still gives our children and our older people healthier lives and less hospital admissions. So I hope we do everything possible. Yes, so on your report, we're looking at page 28. It tells you 29,000 to 43,000 deaths in a typical year. So that might have come down a bit, but when we attribute it to Nuneaton and Bedworth, it came out, I think, as 26 when that research was done. And this report, it only gives you the national figure in here, but the people who did that research did apportion it to various parts of the country. So we're losing life, yeah, and it's not healthy people who are killed off, it's people who are already in the later stages. But it is really important we do try and get these areas cleaner. There are some positives. The electric buses are good, because buses are a large part of the problem, and if we can get those on the routes going through Abbey Green, that'd be really good. Slow-moving buses, they're a big part of the problem. HGVs are particularly bad, particularly all the waste lorries going up to the various industrial estates. And domestic heating. We mustn't forget that half the pollution around these sort of areas is the background level from the heating and all the other stuff going on. So the more we get rid of gas boilers and get people onto heat pumps, the more we do for energy efficiency. So even if they've got gas boilers, if the homes are better insulated, the gas boilers are running for less hours. So we can do an awful lot to get the air pollution better in the Nuneaton and Bedworth. And a lot of these things tie in with our climate change objectives. So the work that people are doing, and the county and the Borough Council do a lot of work on insulating our homes. If some of those schemes could target some of the areas with poor air pollution, it would save the residents money and they'd have cleaner air. So I won't go on for my 6 hours talk on this, but it is a big issue, and I'm very keen we don't revoke the air quality zone in around Eton School. Eton School's expanding, Top Farm's being built out, and when they demolish Eton Gym and make a big roundabout and make more traffic go through town, they're not improving that gyratory. So if we get 20% more traffic through because you got rid of the other bottleneck, we could get 20% more pollution by Eton School. So I really ask we keep these zones, at least for a few years, invest in electric buses, invest in home insulation and things that actually reduce the background. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kandaka, and I like what you're saying about electric buses and better home insulation, and I look forward to seeing the Green Group budget in February with those items. Councillor Shires.
Is the constant or the continual or the amount of traffic lights causing some of the poor air quality with the congestion? Because it does feel sometimes that you drive 100 yards, 200 yards down the road and you're at yet another set of traffic lights, and we're all sat there burning away all our diesel and our petrol. And the fact, these are just some of the many things that really annoy me. The fact that the traffic lights go out of sync, so that as soon as somebody presses the green button, even though, let's take the one-way system, they will go red, where everybody has to stop, but then still a walker will come, a pedestrian, and press the button and not move until it all goes. Anyway, is there a way of somehow, and Councillor Chronicle's going to shoot me for this, having less pedestrian crossings and just having zebra crossings, which I think would be better, and to actually have it so that the traffic lights are actually in sync, so that you haven't constantly got the traffic stopping and starting, because I know going through Weddington, it is literally traffic lights drive, and you know, there is, sorry, but it's just a point of all you see around that one-way system is constant traffic, and in the mornings coming down Higham Lane, it's bumper to bumper, and it is purely because of the traffic lights, because then you get past through the one-way system and it's empty. Surely there has got to be something. It doesn't take a brain scientist to work out that actually getting those in sync will alleviate traffic.
And not just that as well, but unnecessary roadworks as well.
No. I mean, the overarching point, it's true to say that traffic that stops and starts is worse for air quality because the acceleration phase produces a lot more emissions than a car travelling constantly. I suppose ultimately it's a question for highways, but I suppose the query would be, well, if they didn't have the traffic lights, would it actually just the congestion be worse because they're doing something presumably to alleviate congestion by sort of regulating it, I suppose, but it ultimately would be a question for the highways team. I mean, it's a similar sort of question to previously around the synchronisation of traffic lights, and it's a question I can pose to the people who know a bit more about these things, I guess, and I'll do that at the next meeting of the steering group, because highways are represented. In terms of generally the number of traffic lights and things, I mean, I know that the Transforming the Nuneaton program's obviously got a programme for the gyratory, but that's not imminent, that's a bit further down the line. But all of those programmes are geared towards better traffic flow. So in the longer term, their plan is that that's what happens. They've modelled it in terms of air quality, and the reason we've used it in the air quality action plan is that their modelling shows that it will be an air quality betterment, that work. So hopefully that will improve that, you know, the kind of flow elements of the traffic. But I take your point, and yeah, the stop-start is the worst. You know, there's been surveys done in Oxford where they've had a monitor fitted to a bus, and things even like traffic humps where it has to stop, slow down, go over, accelerate. Emissions really peak because of that process rather than free flowing. But then, you know, the traffic modelers would probably look at things and think, well, if there was no traffic kind of control, then I guess it would end up in a complete logjam. But yeah, I take your point.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to move a recommendation to the committee, which I will read as follows. In light of the evidence provided to the committee that nitrogen dioxide concentrations have not passed the objective threshold in the last 10 years, the committee endorses the revocation of Air Quality Management Area 1. Further, the committee supports the continuation of air quality monitoring in the areas of new and proposed housing. I'm going to propose that. Does that receive a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shires. Does any member wish to speak on that recommendation? Councillor Shires, Condacor.
Chair, you sometimes make mistakes, but I think confusing me with Councillor Shires is probably going to be the biggest today. I'm strongly against revoking it because one of these things, it gives us some mentioning in when there's new planning applications. If there's an air quality management zone there, they tends to make them do better reports and study what's the impact on the air quality management zone. So with the horrendous amounts of development, I'm really not going to support anything that removes the air quality management zone. We need more measuring and more technology. And actually, Councillor Shires mentions the area quite well. We did at one point get the traffic lights resequenced by Eton School because they were going green just as the traffic approached. And there's a great guy at County Council, Garfor, who's the nerd of traffic lights. But he can come and actually make traffic lights work better and see which the loops aren't working things. So I think that sort of thing does need to happen to make the air quality better, but I think we need to keep the zone, and I think we need to have it monitored better.
Okay, so I see no other indications to speak on the recommendation, which I proposed and was seconded by Councillor Shires, so I'm going to put that to a vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Against? So that's 6 votes in favour and 1 vote against. So we endorse that AQMA 1 be revoked. But of course, we continue to support air quality monitoring where there is new dwellings being built and where we expect new houses to be built. You know as well as I that happens anyway, Councillor Kandaka. So your point is made, but it already happens. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is item 9, the Integrated Performance Report for the second quarter of 23-24. We have Steve Gore, who is here to present that item. I think Steve is joining us virtually.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Yeah, good, brilliant. So Steve, as always, I don't expect you to go line by line through the report, but if there's anything of interest that you think might be worth us looking at, as always, please do let us know.
Yeah. Well, if you're not requiring the summary this evening, I have got a couple of points just to raise, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. The first thing to say is that the finance data shows actual figures and not thousands, as indicated by the column headings, which was touched on earlier. And it's been that way for some time, actually, that no one's picked that up. So I will correct that, and apologies for the confusion. And in answer to Councillor Condacor's question earlier, I've already spoken to a finance officer regarding looking at providing a similar table to the general fund for the HRA for the next quarter report, the third quarter.
Steve, thank you very much. We do have a public speaker on this item, and that is Mrs. Condacor. So you've got the floor.
I mean, I haven't looked at every page and things, but on page 86, the Freedom of Information EIR requests and complaints summary. I mean, it sounds like quite big numbers and quite, a reasonable number running late, but there's no comparison. I don't know whether that's good, bad, better, or whatever. So any of these things really ought to have the previous years or the previous quarters bits so they actually, mean something. And the reasons for these things being late, because you're actually given a reasonable amount of time to deal with them. My other question was really on page 87, the Health, Environment and OSP Financial Summary, General Fund. Under Health and Health and Environment, it's got 3 things, and I'd like some sort of a bit of explanation as to what the difference between environmental protection, environmental projects, and environmental sustainability is. And I mean, I know what I think environmental sustainability should be, and it's worrying to me that that one is the one that looks like it's going to be underspent. And with climate change and things, I think that is something that should really be higher on the priorities and actually happening more, not less. I think.
Thank you for your point, Mrs. Kandaka. If it's possible, through yourself, Maria, would you be able to speak to Environmental Health and just provide Mrs. Kandaka with a breakdown of what comes under each of those 3 items? Just to provide some clarity. But I think it's important to stress that in terms of, obviously reference an underspend on environmental sustainability, but we are seeing an overspend on environmental protection, and that's the really important stuff that it's residents that complain to us about. So that can be anything around noise complaints, pollution complaints, smells, etc., and those are the things that our residents expect us to deal with promptly. So that's important as well. Were there any points that members wanted to raise under this item? Councillor Kandaka.
On page 91, it talks about reduced income from Eaton House, which is obviously the bit opposite, which is where we had lots of people who were temporarily homeless. £100,000 is expected to be the, it's actually 100 million, but obviously if we ignore all the figures being wrong, it's 100,000 shortfall. I can't understand how a homeless unit we've got is actually not getting enough income, because obviously there's something strange going on. Is it empty part of the time? And I mean, the Q2 figure is even worse. So it would be nice if we had some occupancy data to understand why it's actually losing so much money. So maybe we could leave that with officers' answer.
No, and I've always stressed to members that Steve can't be an expert on every office in the council. So as much as I'm sure he would like to be, but could we just get maybe Nicola or Jane from housing to look at that point, Steve, and if a written response could be provided to the committee, that would be useful. Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, I can do that. On the other point on FOIs, obviously what's provided is what was asked for in the past. So if you're looking for some sort of comparison, I can do the previous period.
Yeah. What would also be interesting knowing is out of those FOIs, how many of those FOIs have come from one specific individual? Or two or three individuals. Anyway,
Chair, I think we've had this question before, and I think there are.
I was being sarcastic,
like,
don't worry.
For want of a better term, repeat offenders, and there are probably 3 or 4 areas. But if you want me to try and get that information, I can do.
No,
but obviously, there's data protection to think about as well.
No, that was my attempt at being sarcastic, but obviously.
Yes, I thought it was.
Anyway, I see no other member. Okay, on this item, yes? Okay, one more contribution.
On a ration, but one of the figures that really alerted me to things going wrong was on page 95, and there's not even any commentary. And I get it that the figures from the millions aren't billions, but it doesn't say what it is, and it can't possibly be 2, 4, 5. Yeah, the figures are just like random numbers. Yeah, you can't get to 4,134 with 8 million odd into Q2. The whole lot is nonsense, and it doesn't say what it is. So
I think okay. Let's just put that to a side. A mistake has been made. It's going to be amended, and it's going to come back to us.
But
okay?
the other point is we don't understand what those numbers are anyway. That even if we ignoring that mistake, there's another mistake because those numbers don't make sense. And I looked at the report, Q1 report, and that all made sense. You got a number, and you got a slightly different number at Q1, and then you got a slightly different end of year forecast. But the end of the year forecast wasn't 100 times less than the budget. So, yeah, they're just meaningless numbers. I've got no idea what they are.
Yeah. A mistake has been made. We accept the mistake has been made, and it's going to come back to us. We're not talking billions, clearly, okay? I don't even think the largest council in the country could talk billions in this specific case, but a mistake's been made. We'll get it back. And I think Steve's got the message on that as well. So, okay. One more.
Steve Gore is perfectly liberty to say how many I make, but one of the issues I have had is when I asked for something like the fly tipping figures was totally bogus a few weeks ago, I put a request in ahead of last week's scrutiny meeting for the fly tipping figures, and the council considered that a freedom of information request, whereas I was actually asking for the figures as a member of the scrutiny committee to be discussed at a scrutiny committee. So when members are actually asking officers questions, they are not freedom of information requests automatically if they're to do with our work on this committee.
Does it come from yourself? But sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, so I don't see there's any more contributions. So I think we'll move on. So we can now go to item 10, which is the Housing, Environment and Health Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. That's on page 136. So members will know that every year each OSP essentially provides a report to full council to summarise its activities and what it's achieved over the municipal year. And this report, which is on page 136, is what I wish to present to full council in February. Sorry, not in February, in April. Yeah, the one before the one before the election in April. So I'd like to propose that we send this to full council. Does that receive a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hartshaw. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Kandaka.
All very, very small writing. And if we made the outcomes column narrower, we could use a bigger font, because it is micro dot writing. So in terms of formatting and presentation, I think changing the column widths around so the one with the most writing in is wider would allow a bigger font. The second thing to note is recommendations. Looking at our annual report, we haven't actually recommended anything all year, really, apart from saying thank you to people. So I think that's very disappointing.
Actually, well, you can, the people will make a decision in May. Anyway, so are there any other contributions? No? Okay, so we'll vote on whether to refer this now to full council. So all those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions, so that's 6 in favour and 1 against. So we'll now move on to item 11, which is the forward plan, which is attached on page 140. This is obviously just for noting. Are there any members who wish to speak on this? Councillor Kandaka.
Member, I was most alarmed that the housing strategy, which in this version of the paper is due in March, is now due in June. And I think the Scrutiny Committee should have a look at it before it goes to Cabinet. So I think the housing strategy should be a work item we look at as it's being developed, and maybe officers could come and explain what things are like to be in it, and so we can have an influence on it, because you have been in charge for 3 years and you haven't produced a strategy. So I think as you're producing this strategy, the Scrutiny Committee should have a little say on it. Thank you, Chair.
Before going to Cabinet, and I think that's the policy of the council, and I would expect that to happen in this specific case. So are there any other points, Councillor Shires?
Sorry. So we've got the annual report for Pinch. Pardon? That's the next one. Have I looking at the wrong thing?
It's the one before, which is the forward plan.
Oh, sorry. I was at the wrong page.
It's okay. Any other comments on the forward plan? No? Okay, so we'll now go to item 12, which is the work programme attached on page 149. Councillor Shires.
Now I'm at the right place. Yes, I just wanted... Am I allowed to sort of ask for things to be brought forward and things, because I think there's some bits that I need... Right. So I would like to ask for the annual report for Pinch to be brought forward, and for us to be asking County Council to attend. A couple of reasons for this is the board for Pinch, all residents have now resigned. County Council are not responding to anything with regards to it. And it is in dire straits just from the fact that everybody's resigned from it. And County Council aren't responding, and neither are Borough Council on anything regarding finances or anything, so nobody knows what's happening. So if we could bring that forward.
So actually, it's a fair point you make, because this was meant to be, I can't remember which meeting this was last on the agenda. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it is part of us.
Yeah. Anyway, there was an issue in that the officer who was responsible for Pride in Camp Hill didn't attend,
didn't come.
And then we later discovered that
She'd left.
She had left.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit confused actually about
Everybody's
what what it is that the council is responsible for with respect to Pride in Camp Hill.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy for this item to come forward to the next meeting, but what I think would be useful is actually if myself, Councillor Shires and Councillor Cooper as the other ward councillor for Camp Hill could have a meeting with one of the housing directors to actually understand what is going on.
Dawn Dawson's leading it at the moment.
Right.
And we could potentially invite Andrew Moore, who is the chair of Pinch as well. I think it'd be really useful.
That's fine
for
with
him.
me.
And
Yeah.
I'd certainly like to know what's going on.
So, Maria, could you just ask Dawn Dawson if a meeting could be arranged between myself, the two Camp Hill ward members, and Mr. Moore to understand what's going on with Pride in Camp Hill? Because I'm confused myself, to be honest.
We all are.
I do remember when I sat on the predecessor to this OSP, which used to be called the External Overview and Scrutiny Panel, during when Labour was in control of the council. Pride in Camp Hill provide us with an annual update summarising its activities, and we used to have one of the Pinch officers come. So yeah, but if we can have a meeting first to discuss, because obviously if it doesn't exist anymore, there's not really much they can come to say.
To be fair, if it doesn't exist anymore in it, with this company, it's a lot of issues.
Right.
A lot of issues.
So are we happy, in principle, for us to bring that item to the next meeting, depending on what happens? Yeah. Okay. Any other contributions on this item? Councillor Kandaka.
We're getting told when officers are leaving. There's a big reorganisation going on, and it'd be useful if we had not all the detail officers, but a bit of a structure chart post reconfiguration. Because we could be sending emails to people about, say, air quality. I know the officers are still here, but if we don't know officers have left, we don't know what the structure is. So.
Which the employee bulletin, which is also sent to councillors, I accept it's sort of on the last pages of the bulletin, but it is on the bulletins. So it's worth making sure that you're receiving the employee bulletin. Councillor Gutteridge?
Excellent customer services. You put it on customer services, you then get a number, and then they come back to you, or put it on member inquiries, and you get it come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Harbison.
I'm going to have a quick look now, but I've never received an employee, the bulletin to which you refer. I had no idea.
It was sent to all councillors. I think the last one was, Maria, you must get the employee bulletins being an employee of the council, but I did read it earlier last week. So anyway, we need to ensure that members are also receiving the employee bulletin. It's always useful to read the leaders forward on that bulletin as well to hear what the latest developments at the council are.
Copy, because it comes via the comms.
No, okay. Anyway, speak to IT, Councillor Harbison. I'm sure they can resolve it. Okay, so item 13 is any other business. Just two things to remind members of. We had a briefing paper come through to us on primary care and general practice locally. I hope that all members have had a read of that. Also, there's a meeting next week of the Business Regeneration and Planning OSP. Now, you may recall that we asked that there be a joint item to discuss issues around Section 106 contributions, because it was found that it overlapped between both OSPs. So all of us are invited to attend that OSP next week for that specific item to speak on it. We can't vote if there's a vote arising on the item, but the opportunity is there if you wish to attend to do so. Are there any other items under this? Councillor Kandaka.
the 2nd of January response, because we had lots of flooding, and every few hours the officers came to Cleaver Gardens to check the levels, and they kept having reassuring calls to the people who live closest to the river to make sure if they needed to move out, they knew who to ring. So I do think it's good, particularly the people on the ground who actually look after people when there's an emergency. So can you pass the thanks on from the...
Sure. Very grateful. So go on, one more, Councillor Shires.
Sorry, is there a way that we can just monitor what's going on with the fire in here so that we can just make sure that we're getting the right service and that throughout? Is there, can we have that put in with something?
Well, so my view on this is the model that is being proposed is essentially been confirmed by the Chief Fire Officer that it's continually under review. But I think that if there were issues arising with it, I think the best place for that to go to is the Fire and Rescue Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwickshire County Council. I understand that they wanted to come this evening to try and seek our views to try and inform their consultation response. But I'm sure all of the parties in this room have representatives on that committee at Shire Hall, so I think that's the best place for it to go to. So if that is it, I'm going to close the meeting at 1 minute to 8, and thank you very much for your attendance.